The first thing I noticed when I opened my front door wasn't the overturned furniture or the scattered papers. It was the silence, that heavy, unnatural quiet that wraps around you like a burial shroud, whispering that something is terribly wrong. I'm Audrey, and I just spent 3 days at a corporate retreat learning how to trust my colleagues through ridiculous team-building exercises. Now I'm standing in my ransacked living room, realizing I should have been more concerned about trusting my own family. My fingers trembled as I dialed Ryan's number. 1 ring, 2 rings, the familiar click of voicemail. Of course, my dear husband was probably at his mother's house, pretending not to know why his wife was calling. Ryan, someone broke into the house. The safe is open. Call me back immediately. I walked through the debris of my violated home, cataloging the damage. Photo frames face down, drawers pulled out and emptied, couch cushions slashed open. But they hadn't been looking for money or jewelry. No, this was personal. They went straight for what mattered most. My grandmother's letters, the only pieces I had left of her. My phone buzzed. Not Ryan. Evan from work. "How was the drive back?" he asked. "Someone broke into my house." My voice cracked. "The safe, they knew the combination, Evan." "Jesus, are you okay? Do you need me to come over?" "No, I know exactly who did this." I kicked aside a torn magazine. "Helen's fingerprints are all over this mess. She's been trying to get those letters for months." "Your mother-in-law, why would she?" "Because she can't stand that Ryan married someone who won't bow to her every whim." I reached the kitchen, where even the cabinets had been emptied. "She thinks those letters prove my grandmother's family wronged hers decades ago. Some ancient real estate dispute she won't let die." "Call the police," Evan said. "And tell them what?" "That my mother-in-law used a key my husband probably gave her to steal family documents. That my sister-in-law probably helped because she's bitter about her divorce and wants to hurt someone else's marriage." I laughed, but it came out hollow. "They're too smart for that. They'll say Ryan gave them permission. It'll be my word against the entire Miller family." The basement door stood open. I hadn't checked down there yet. "I have to go, Evan. I need to see what else they took." "Audrey, wait." I hung up and descended the stairs, each step creaking under my feet. The basement light flickered on, revealing more chaos, but something caught my eye. A small piece of paper trapped under a fallen box. I pulled it free. It was a receipt from the hardware store 3 days ago for a duplicate key. My phone buzzed again. "Ryan, where are you?" I asked before he could speak. "At Mom's." "Listen, Audrey, I can explain." "Did you give her a key?" Silence. Then, "She said she just wanted to look for some old family photos while you were away." I didn't think. You never do think when it comes to her, do you? I crushed the receipt in my fist. Those letters were all I had left of my grandmother, Ryan, the only things that were truly mine. "We can talk about this when I get home." "No." The word came out sharp enough to cut. "We'll talk about this in front of everyone. I'm coming over there right now. And Ryan, tell your mother to prepare for war." I ended the call and stood in my destroyed basement, surrounded by the wreckage of trust. They thought they could break me, make me submit to their control, like everyone else in their lives. But they had no idea what they'd just started. Sometimes the most dangerous opponent isn't the one who strikes first. It's the one who knows how to strike back harder. Helen's pristine living room made my skin crawl. Everything perfectly arranged, not a cushion out of place, while my house lay in ruins across town. The family photos on her walls told their own story. Ryan and Chloe's childhood moments, carefully curated to show Helen's version of reality. Not a single picture of my wedding day among them. "I have no idea what you're talking about." Helen's voice dripped honey-sweet poison as she poured tea into delicate cups. "Ryan gave me permission to look for old family albums while you were away. Nothing more." Chloe sat beside her mother, arms crossed, wedding ring conspicuously absent. "You're being hysterical, Audrey, as usual." I placed the hardware store receipt on the coffee table. "Funny how you needed a new key made 3 days ago. Planning ahead?" Ryan shifted in his seat, eyes darting between his mother and me. Maybe we should all calm down. Oh, we're very calm, I said, watching Helen's perfectly manicured fingers tighten around her teacup. Just like we were calm last Christmas when you went through my phone while I was sleeping. Or last month when you showed up unannounced at my office to check on me. I worry about my son, Helen said. Someone needs to look out for his interests. His interests. My laugh felt like broken glass in my throat. Or yours. Mother was right about you from the start. Chloe leaned forward, eyes gleaming. You never understood our family, always keeping secrets, hiding things in that safe of yours. Those letters belong to my grandmother. Letters that prove your family cheated ours 60 years ago. Helen's mask cracked. That property should have been ours. Your grandmother knew exactly what she was doing when she... Mother. Ryan's warning came too late. I stood slowly, pieces clicking into place. So you admit you took them? Helen's face smoothed over instantly. I admitted nothing. And you have no proof. You're right. I pulled out my phone, thumb hovering over the record button. But I will. Ryan, are you coming home or staying here? He looked at his mother, then at me. Always torn, always choosing the path of least resistance. I think maybe we all need space to cool off. Wrong answer. I headed for the door, pausing to look back at Helen. You know what's funny? Those letters you stole? They're not even the originals. Just copies I kept as decoys. Grandmother taught me well. Always keep what matters most, where manipulative people can't reach it. Helen's teacup clattered against its saucer. You're lying. Am I? Guess you'll have to wonder about that, along with what else I might have hidden away. I met Ryan's eyes. Don't bother coming home tonight, or maybe ever. Audrey, wait. He started to rise, but Chloe grabbed his arm. Let her go, she said. She's just trying to manipulate you, like always. I closed the door on Helen's perfectly ordered world and walked to my car. My hands shook as I gripped the steering wheel, but not from fear. The originals were safe, just as I'd said, locked away in a safety deposit box since the day I married Ryan, and saw the hunger in Helen's eyes when grandmother's letters were mentioned at the wedding. My phone buzzed. Evan again. How bad was it? He asked. They took the bait. Helen practically confessed. I started the engine. But I need your help with something else. Remember that security system you installed at your lake house? The one with the hidden cameras. Yeah, why? Because I'm done playing defense. They want to go through my things? Let's make sure we catch them in the act next time. I pulled away from Helen's house, watching it shrink in my rearview mirror. And Evan, thank you for being the one person in my life who actually listens. Always. But Audrey, just be careful. People like that, they're most dangerous when they're cornered. I ended the call, mind already racing with plans. Helen thought she knew everything about me, had me all figured out. But she'd forgotten one crucial detail. I'd spent 3 years watching her manipulate everyone around her. I'd learned from the best. And now it was time to put those lessons to use. The coffee shop across from Helen's favorite salon wasn't my usual spot, but it gave me a perfect view. I'd been watching for 2 hours when Evan slid into the seat across from me, pushing a fresh cup toward my hands. The cameras are set up, he said. Motion sensors, night vision, everything feeding directly to your phone. But are you sure about this? I nodded toward the salon's window, where Helen and Chloe sat getting their weekly manicures. Listen. I pressed play on my phone, their voices crystal clear through the bug I'd planted in Helen's purse during our confrontation. We need those original letters, Helen was saying. That safety deposit box has to be at her bank downtown. Ryan says she's been going through their financial records, Chloe replied, probably planning to divorce him and take everything. Over my dead body, I didn't spend 30 years building this family's reputation to have her destroy it. We're going back to the house tomorrow while she's at work. There has to be something we can use against her. I stopped the recording. Still think I'm paranoid? Evan's face hardened. We should take this to the police. And tell them what? That my mother-in-law is planning to rob me. They'll say it's a family matter. I wrapped my hands around the warm cup. Besides, I want more than just stopping them. I want them to face consequences for once in their privileged lives. My phone buzzed, Ryan calling again. Third time today. I declined it. He's been sleeping at their house, I said. Probably plotting with them, trying to figure out where the originals are. Or maybe he's worried about you. Then he should have worried before giving them a key to our house. The coffee turned bitter in my mouth before choosing them over me. Again. A text from Ryan. Please come home. We need to talk. Home, I muttered. Like that means anything anymore. Evan leaned forward. Audrey, I know you're hurt, but the salon door chimed. Helen and Chloe emerged, fresh manicures gleaming. They headed toward Helen's Mercedes, but Helen paused, looking directly at the coffee shop window. I didn't move, couldn't breathe. Her lips curved into that knowing smile I'd grown to hate. She knew I was watching. Time to go, I said, standing abruptly. They'll be at my house tomorrow at 10, according to their usual schedule. That's when we'll catch them. Evan raised an eyebrow. I thought you wanted to handle this yourself. I do, but I gathered my things, hands shaking slightly. I can't face them alone anymore. I need someone in my corner. Always. He touched my arm gently. Just promise me something. Don't let revenge consume you. I've seen what it does to people. I watched Helen's car pull away, remembering the day she'd first shown her true colors. Our wedding reception, when she'd cornered me in the bathroom. You'll never be good enough for this family, she'd said. One day, Ryan will realize that. This isn't about revenge, I told Evan. It's about justice, and maybe saving Ryan from them, even if he doesn't want to be saved. My phone buzzed again, a text from an unknown number. I opened it and felt my blood freeze. Found something interesting in your grandmother's old law firm records. Tomorrow noon, Riverside Park. Come alone, or Ryan learns everything about the Anderson case. Evan noticed my expression. What's wrong? I closed the message, mind racing. The Anderson case, my grandmother's biggest regret, the secret she'd taken to her grave. The real reason Helen hated our family. Nothing, I lied, forcing a smile. Just work stuff. I should go prepare for tomorrow. But as I walked to my car, Helen's words from 3 years ago echoed in my head. One day Ryan will realize that. Maybe she was right. Maybe tomorrow he would. And maybe it was time he did. Riverside Park looked different at noon. Colder somehow. I sat on a bench, clutching a manila envelope. Ammunition for whatever game Helen was playing. The Anderson case, files my grandmother had sealed away decades ago. Now a weapon in my hands. A shadow fell across my lap. Not Helen. Ryan? My voice cracked. What are you? Mother told me everything. He sat beside me, leaving careful space between us. About the Anderson case. About what your grandmother did to our family. The envelope felt heavier. Did she tell you how your grandfather tried to blackmail mine? How he threatened to destroy their law firm unless they gave him that property? That's not... He stopped, rubbing his face. She said you'd try to twist things. Like she twisted you. I turned to face him. When did you give her the safe combination, Ryan? His silence was answer enough. The day after our wedding, I continued. When she convinced you I was hiding something. That's why you've been checking our bank statements, right? Looking for evidence I'm stealing from you? I was protecting our family. Our family. The laugh that escaped me didn't sound like my voice. There is no our family. There's only ever been yours. My phone buzzed. Evan texting about the cameras he'd installed. Everything was ready for tomorrow's trap. But suddenly, it all felt hollow. She's using you, I said softly. She always has. And you let her because it's easier than standing up to her. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. I stood, dropping the envelope in his lap. Here, the precious Anderson case files. Proof that your grandfather was the one who committed fraud, not mine. Proof that your mother's been lying all these years. He stared at the envelope. How did you get them? From my grandmother's old partner. Turns out he's been waiting years for someone to finally expose the truth. I stepped back. But you know what? Keep them. Burn them. Give them to Helen. I don't care anymore. Audrey, wait. I filed for divorce yesterday. The words hung between us like shattered glass. Ryan's face went pale. You what? Check your email. The papers should arrive today. My hands were steady now. I'm done being the villain in Helen's story. Done watching you choose them over me. Done pretending we have a marriage worth saving. He stood, reaching for me. We can fix this. I'll talk to Mother. That's exactly the problem. I moved away from his touch. Your first instinct is still to run to her. It always will be. My phone buzzed again. Helen this time. Where are you? We had a deal. I typed back, deals changed. Ask Ryan about the files. You can't just throw away 3 years of marriage, Ryan said. You already did that when you gave them the key to our house. I started walking away, then paused. You know what the saddest part is? I actually thought I could save you from them, but you don't want to be saved. Audrey. Goodbye, Ryan. I walked through the park, past the spot where he proposed, past the bench where we used to have Sunday picnics. My phone kept buzzing. Helen, Ryan, even Chloe. I silenced them all. Only Evan's message got through. Cameras are live. You still want to go through with tomorrow's plan? I stopped at the park exit, looking back one last time. Ryan stood where I'd left him, envelope clutched in his hands, looking lost. For a moment, my resolve wavered. Then I remembered the ransacked house, the violated safe, 3 years of subtle manipulation and gaslighting. Yes, I texted back, but change of plans. I don't just want to catch them in the act anymore. What do you want? I watched Ryan pull out his phone, probably calling Helen, always running back to Mother. I want to destroy them, I typed, all of them. Because sometimes the only way to save yourself is to burn everything to the ground and start over. The security camera feed flickered on my laptop screen as I sat in my car across the street. 10 minutes until Helen's usual Thursday morning intrusion. Evan's sophisticated setup captured every angle of my house. Front door, back door, even the garden path Helen loved to criticize. You don't have to watch this, Evan said from the passenger seat. We can just let the cameras record. I need to see it. My knuckles whitened around my coffee cup. Need to know exactly how they do it. Right on schedule, Helen's Mercedes glided to a stop in front of my house. She stepped out, perfectly coiffed as always, followed by Chloe. But then a third door opened. Ryan. The coffee cup crumpled in my grip. He's helping them. They approached the front door, Ryan glancing nervously over his shoulder. Helen said something, gesturing impatiently. He pulled out a key, not the copy, but his original. Jesus, Evan muttered. Audrey, maybe we should… Wait, I grabbed his arm as a fourth figure emerged from Helen's car. Who is that? The man in the expensive suit walked with authority, carrying a briefcase. He looked familiar somehow. That's James Morton, Evan said. Helen's lawyer. I've seen him at charity events. The group disappeared inside my house. I switched between camera views, watching them move through rooms with disturbing familiarity. Helen directed them like a general commanding troops. The study, she was saying, voice clear through the hidden microphones. Those Anderson files have to be here somewhere. Mother, she said she gave them to me, Ryan protested weakly. Copies, obviously. You think your wife would give up her only leverage? Search everything. I watched them tear through my home again, but this time was different. This time, I saw Ryan's hands shaking as he opened drawers, saw Chloe's satisfied smirk as she knocked books off shelves, saw Helen's mask slip when she thought no one was watching, revealing raw desperation beneath. The safe, Morton said suddenly. Did you check behind it? My breath caught. The wall safe had been a decoy. Everyone knew about it. But behind it, there's nothing back there, Ryan said quickly, too quickly. Helen's eyes narrowed. Move it. Mother, move it. I grabbed my phone, fingers hovering over 911. Behind that safe was a hidden compartment, installed by the previous owner. Inside were documents far more damaging than the Anderson case. Evidence of Helen's own financial misconduct, carefully gathered over 3 years of watching and waiting. Ryan stepped forward, then stopped. No. What did you say? Helen turned on him. I said no. His voice strengthened. This ends now. We're leaving. After everything I've done for you. Helen's calm cracked. That woman has poisoned you against your own family. That woman is my wife. Not anymore, Morton interrupted smoothly. The divorce papers were filed yesterday. You have no legal right to prevent us from… From what? I stepped into the doorway, phone recording everything. Breaking and entering, destruction of property, conspiracy. They froze like guilty children, except Helen. She smiled that knowing smile. Perfect timing, dear. We were just discussing the Anderson case and other family matters. I can see that. I moved further into the room, Evan close behind. But you made one mistake, Helen. You got sloppy. Desperate. I don't know what you mean. The Anderson case was never about property fraud, was it? It was about covering up what really happened. What you did. Her smile slipped. You're confused. The real documents aren't behind that safe. They're already with the district attorney. I met Ryan's stunned gaze, along with proof that your mother embezzled millions from her own charity foundation. That's why she's so desperate to find evidence against my family. To protect herself. The room erupted in chaos. Helen lunged for her lawyer. Chloe started screaming. Ryan stood frozen between them all. But I kept my eyes on Helen, watching her perfect world crumble. Sometimes revenge isn't about destroying someone. Sometimes it's about letting them destroy themselves. And sometimes justice comes from simply telling the truth. The police lights painted my living room in alternating red and blue. Helen sat primly on the couch, tears streaming down her perfectly made-up face as she spoke to the officers. I was just trying to protect my son, she sobbed. From her, she pointed at me, and I watched 3 years of careful planning crumble. Mrs. Miller was threatening our family, Morton added smoothly. We have evidence of her harassment, her obsession with destroying her mother-in-law's reputation. The break-in was merely an attempt to recover documents that rightfully belonged to the family. My phone felt heavy in my pocket, the recording of their intrusion now useless. They'd gotten ahead of me, turned it all around, just like Helen always did. That's not true, Ryan said suddenly. All eyes turned to him. Mother, stop. Just stop. Helen's tears vanished instantly. Ryan, dear, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. He stepped away from her, toward me, but I backed away. Too little, too late. The embezzlement accusations, they're true, aren't they? That's why you've been so desperate to destroy Audrey's family's reputation, to cover your tracks. Everything I did was for this family. Helen's mask shattered completely. That money secured your future, your sister's future, and she jabbed a finger at me, threatened to ruin everything. The officers exchanged glances. One spoke into his radio. Mrs. Helen Miller, we're going to need you to come down to the station. This is absurd. I'm the victim here. She turned to her lawyer. Morton, do something. But Morton was already edging toward the door. I think our professional relationship has concluded, Helen, given the circumstances. Everything happened quickly after that. Helen screaming as they led her away. Chloe following, wailing about family loyalty. Morton slipping out during the chaos. The evidence I'd gathered being collected, documented, tagged. Ryan stayed. Audrey, he started. Don't. I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly cold. Just don't. I didn't know about the charity money, about any of it, I swear. But you knew about the break-ins, the harassment, the lies. My voice cracked. You chose them. Every single time, you chose them. I can fix this. Fix what? I gestured at our destroyed home. My grandmother's letters are still gone. Our marriage is over. Your mother's going to jail. What exactly can you fix? Evan appeared in the doorway. Audrey, the detective needs your statement. I moved to follow him, but Ryan caught my arm. I love you, he said desperately. Isn't that worth something? I looked at his hand on my arm. remembering every touch, every promise, every moment I'd thought we were building something real. Then I remembered watching him help them break into our home, watching him choose his mother's lies over my truth one last time. Love without trust isn't love, I said quietly. It's just another form of control. I pulled away, leaving him standing in the wreckage of our life together. The detective waited with more questions, more forms, more procedures, hours of explaining how I'd gathered evidence of Helen's embezzlement, how I'd documented her harassment, how I'd watched my marriage die slowly, under the weight of manipulation and lies. Later, alone in my car, I pulled out my grandmother's last letter, the real one, not the copy Helen had stolen, the one I'd kept close all these years. "Remember, dear heart," she'd written. "Sometimes winning means walking away. Sometimes the greatest victory is in refusing to play their game at all." My phone buzzed. Ryan again. I declined the call and started the engine. In the rearview mirror, I could see him standing in the doorway of what used to be our home, looking lost. For a moment, my heart ached. But as I drove away, I realized something. In trying to destroy Helen, I'd almost become her. Manipulative, obsessed with control, willing to sacrifice anything for victory. My grandmother had been right. The real win wasn't in bringing Helen down. It was in finally setting myself free. The courthouse hallway stretched endless and cold. I sat on a hard wooden bench, watching Helen's society friends whisper among themselves as they waited for her arraignment. 3 weeks since the break-in, and still they couldn't quite believe their charitable board president was facing embezzlement charges. Ryan appeared at the end of the hall, dark circles under his eyes. Chloe clung to his arm, shooting daggers at me with her eyes. I focused on my phone, pretending to read emails. "Audrey," his voice was closer than I expected. "Can we talk?" "The divorce papers are with your lawyer," I said without looking up. "Just sign them." "That's not," he sat beside me, too close. "Mother wants to make a deal." Now I looked at him. "A deal?" "She'll return your grandmother's letters, all of them, if you drop the charges." A laugh bubbled up, bitter as coffee grounds. "You really don't get it, do you? She's still my mother. And that's all that matters, right?" I stood, needing distance. Even after everything she did, everything she stole, she made mistakes. Mistakes, my voice carried, making heads turn. She systematically destroyed our marriage, terrorized me in my own home, stole millions from her own charity. Those aren't mistakes, Ryan. They're choices. Helen's lawyer appeared, beckoning to Ryan. But before he could move, the courthouse doors burst open. Evan rushed in, clutching a manila envelope. "Got it," he said, breathing hard. "Found it in Morton's office." I opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a single document, a letter from Helen to her lawyer, dated 3 years ago, the day before my wedding. "What is that?" Ryan asked. "Insurance," I said, scanning the contents. "In case I ever threatened her control over you." I looked up as Helen entered in handcuffs, flanked by officers. She planned this from the beginning. The harassment, the break-ins, everything. It was all calculated to make me look unstable, obsessed with the Anderson case. Helen's eyes locked onto the letter. For the first time, I saw real fear there. "Where did you get that?" she demanded. "Your lawyer isn't as loyal as you thought." I held up the letter. "You documented everything, Helen. Every step of your plan to destroy me. And now everyone's going to know exactly who you are. You ungrateful little..." She lunged forward, but the officers held her back. "Mother, stop." Ryan moved between us. "Just stop." Helen's face crumpled. "Everything I did was for you. To protect you from her." "From what?" Ryan's voice cracked. "From being happy? From having a life outside your control. She never loved you like I do." "No," I interrupted. "I loved him enough to let him choose. You loved him enough to make sure he never could." The whispers around us grew louder. Helen's friends watched in horror as their perfect society matron shattered before their eyes. Chloe backed away from her mother, finally seeing the truth she'd helped enable. The arraignment's starting. Evan said softly. I handed the letter to the district attorney, who'd been waiting quietly nearby. Then I turned to Ryan one last time. I did love you, I said. But love shouldn't hurt like this. Audrey, please. Goodbye, Ryan. I walked away as Helen was led into the courtroom, her carefully constructed world collapsing behind me. My phone buzzed. A text from my grandmother's old law partner. Found something in the archives. It read, "Your grandmother would be proud." Outside, the autumn air felt clean and sharp. Evan caught up with me at the bottom of the courthouse steps. "You okay?" he asked. I watched leaves scatter across the pavement, breaking free from their branches, carried away by the wind. "No," I said honestly, "but I will be. Because sometimes winning isn't about destroying your enemies. Sometimes it's about refusing to let them destroy you. And sometimes the greatest revenge is simply walking away, head held high, leaving them to face the consequences of their own choices." The last box from my old life sat unopened on my new apartment floor. Through the window, downtown lights glittered like scattered stars, so different from the suburban darkness I'd left behind. My phone lit up, Evan's text about Helen's sentencing. 5 years for embezzlement. The society pages were already buzzing with scandal. Her carefully crafted reputation shattered like a dropped teacup. A knock at the door made me freeze. I knew that pattern. 3 quick taps, 1 slow. Ryan stood in the hallway, holding a familiar leather-bound bundle. "Grandmother's letters," I said, throat tight. "Found them in Mother's study while cleaning out the house." He held them out like a peace offering. "They were always yours." I took the bundle, fingers tracing the worn edges. "How is she?" "Angry. Bitter." He shrugged. "Chloe's in therapy. Says she's starting to understand some things about our family. And you?" "Learning to stand on my own." He glanced past me into the apartment. "You're painting." An easel stood by the window, canvas half covered in bold strokes of red and gold, something I discovered by accident, a way to pour out everything words couldn't express. "It helps," I said simply. "Audrey, I don't." I stepped back, creating distance. "We both know why it ended." "I know, He pulled out an envelope. The signed divorce papers. "And something else you should see." Inside was a newspaper clipping from 30 years ago. A small article about a young Helen Miller, before she married into money, desperately trying to prove herself worthy of high society. "She was always afraid," Ryan said quietly, "of losing control, of being exposed as not good enough. I'm not excusing what she did, but I understand it now. Understanding doesn't make it right. No, but it helps me not become her." A siren wailed somewhere in the city below. In my old life, I would have flinched at the noise. Now it felt like a reminder. Life goes on, changes, transforms. "I never wanted revenge," I said, surprising myself with the truth of it. "I just wanted to be free." "I know, that's why you won." He turned to leave, then paused. "The painting, it's beautiful." After he left, I opened the bundle of letters. My grandmother's words flowed across the pages, telling stories of strength, of standing up to bullies, of choosing integrity over revenge. But one passage caught my eye, written just before she died. "Remember, dear heart, some people will try to dim your light because they fear their own darkness. Your power lies not in fighting them, but in continuing to shine." I picked up my brush, adding touches of blue to the canvas. Not everything needed resolution. Not every story needed a neat ending. Sometimes victory wasn't in destroying your enemies or even forgiving them. Sometimes it was in discovering who you really were without them. My phone buzzed again. Evan inviting me to dinner. Not a date, not yet, but maybe someday. For now, friendship was enough. For now, I had my freedom, my truth, my art. The city lights flickered, casting shadows that danced across my canvas. In my old life, I would have seen threats in those shadows. Now I saw possibilities, patterns, stories waiting to be told. I picked up another brush. The night was young. The canvas was waiting. And for the first time in years, I felt truly, completely free. Not because I'd won, not because Helen lost, but because I'd finally learned the difference between revenge and liberation. And in that difference, I found myself.
My name is Eve, and I never thought I'd be plotting revenge against my own husband. But here I am, trapped in a loveless marriage with a man who sees me as nothing more than a convenient punching bag for his frustrations. You're nothing but a barren, useless excuse of a wife. I'm doing you a favor by letting you gain some parenting experience. Be grateful, Eve. Caleb spat, his voice dripping with contempt. I flinched as he slammed the front door, leaving me alone to face the chaos of Emma's kids wreaking havoc in our once peaceful home. The sound of shattering glass echoed from the living room, followed by high-pitched squeals and laughter. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and wondered how I'd ended up here. Just 5 years ago, Caleb had swept me off my feet with grand gestures and promises of eternal love. Now, at 34, I found myself questioning every decision that led to this moment. Aunt Eve. Ben's trying to flush my dolly down the toilet. Lucy's shrill voice pierced through my thoughts. I rushed upstairs, my heart pounding. Ben, stop that right now, I shouted, yanking the bathroom door open. The 7-year-old boy looked up at me, his eyes wide with feigned innocence. I was just giving her dolly a bath, he said, a mischievous grin spreading across his face. I snatched the doll from his hands and handed it back to a sniffling Lucy. Go play in the backyard, both of you. And no more flushing things down the toilet. As I herded the children outside, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Caleb. Emma needs us to watch the kids overnight. Don't screw this up. My stomach churned. One day had already pushed me to my limits, and now I was expected to handle 3 unruly children for an entire night? I typed back a quick response. Caleb, I can't do this alone. Can't we ask your parents for help? His reply was almost instantaneous. Don't be pathetic, Eve. If you can't handle kids for one night, how do you expect to ever be a mother? The words stung, reopening the wound of our infertility struggles. I blinked back tears, refusing to let them fall. This wasn't the life I had envisioned for myself. A crash from the backyard jolted me back to reality. I raced outside to find Riley, the youngest at 5 years old, covered in mud and giggling uncontrollably. Look, Aunt Eve. I'm a mud monster, he exclaimed, running towards me with outstretched arms. I dodged his muddy embrace, my patience wearing thin. Riley, that's enough. All of you, inside now. It's time to clean up and have dinner. As I corralled the children back into the house, my mind wandered to the day we'd bumped into Emma at the grocery store. Caleb's eyes had lit up in a way I hadn't seen in years, and my heart had sunk. I should have known then that trouble was brewing. Can we have pizza for dinner? Ben asked, snapping me out of my thoughts. I sighed, too exhausted to argue. Fine, pizza it is. While the kids squabbled over toppings, I placed the order and retreated to the kitchen. Leaning against the counter, I pulled out my phone and stared at my contact list. My finger hovered over my sister Hannah's name. We hadn't spoken in years, not since our falling out over Caleb. She had warned me about him, said he would break my heart. I had been too blinded by love to listen. Now, as I stood in my chaotic kitchen, surrounded by the mess of a life I never wanted, I realized how right she had been. But could I swallow my pride and reach out to her now? As another crash echoed through the house, followed by more screaming, I knew I had no choice. I needed help, and Hannah was my only hope. With trembling fingers, I pressed the call button, praying she would answer. As the phone rang, I steeled myself for what was to come. One way or another, things were about to change. I never expected a simple trip to the grocery store would be the catalyst for my world unraveling. But there she was, standing in the produce aisle, her perfectly manicured hand hovering over a pile of avocados. Emma? Caleb's voice rang out, a note of excitement I hadn't heard in years coloring his tone. The woman turned, her face lighting up with recognition. Caleb. Oh my God, it's been forever. I stood frozen, watching as my husband embraced his ex-girlfriend with far too much enthusiasm. When they finally broke apart, Emma's gaze fell on me, her smile never wavering. And you must be Eve, she said, extending her hand. I've heard so much about you. I forced a smile, shaking her hand. Funny, I can't say the same. Caleb shot me a warning glance before turning back to Emma. How have you been? Last I heard, you were moving to California. Emma laughed, a tinkling sound that set my teeth on edge. Oh, that didn't work out. I'm back in town now, with my 3 little ones in tow. You have kids? Caleb asked, his eyes widening with interest. 3 of them, Emma replied, her smile turning wistful. It's been challenging being a single mom. I watched as Caleb's expression softened, and a knot formed in my stomach. I knew that look. It was the same one he used to give me when we first started dating. We should catch up properly, Caleb said, his voice eager. Why don't you come over for dinner sometime? I opened my mouth to protest, but Emma beat me to it. That sounds lovely. How about this Friday? Before I could interject, Caleb was nodding enthusiastically. Perfect. We'll see you then. As Emma walked away with a wave, I turned to Caleb, my voice low and angry. What the hell was that? He shrugged, already pushing the cart towards the checkout.
What?
It's just dinner with an old friend. An old girlfriend, I corrected. And you didn't even ask me if I was okay with it. Caleb's jaw tightened. I didn't realize I needed your permission to invite friends over, Eve. The ride home was tense, filled with loaded silence. As we unpacked the groceries, I tried one last time to reason with him. Caleb, I'm not comfortable with this. Can't we just cancel? He slammed a can of tomatoes onto the counter, making me jump. For God's sake, Eve, stop being so insecure. It's pathetic. I flinched at his words, feeling the familiar sting of tears. But I blinked them back, refusing to let him see how much he'd hurt me. Friday arrived all too quickly. I spent the day cleaning the house, my stomach in knots. When the doorbell rang at 7 p.m. sharp, I plastered on my best fake smile and opened the door. Emma stood there, looking effortlessly glamorous in a flowing sundress. Behind her were 3 children, all bearing a striking resemblance to their mother.
Eve, darling,
Emma exclaimed, air-kissing my cheeks. Thank you so much for having us. These are my little angels, Lucy, Ben, and Riley. The kids mumbled hellos, eyeing me warily. As they filed past me into the house, I caught a whiff of Emma's expensive perfume and felt suddenly self-conscious in my simple jeans and blouse. Caleb appeared then, his face lighting up at the sight of Emma. You made it.
Come in.
Kids, make yourselves at home. And just like that, my carefully ordered world descended into chaos. The children scattered, their excited shrieks echoing through the house. Emma glided into the living room, Caleb hovering attentively at her side. I retreated to the kitchen, busying myself with dinner preparations. Through the doorway, I could hear Emma's melodious laughter mingling with Caleb's deep chuckles. The sound made my chest ache. As I stirred the pasta sauce, I caught snippets of their conversation. Always knew you'd be successful, Caleb. You were always so ambitious. Can't believe how amazing you look, Em. The years have been kind. I gripped the wooden spoon tighter, willing myself to stay calm. But as I glanced into the living room and saw Caleb's hand resting casually on Emma's knee, I knew with sickening certainty that this was only the beginning of my nightmare. The weeks following that fateful dinner became a blur of chaos and mounting frustration. Emma's visits, once an anomaly, transformed into an almost daily occurrence. My home, once a sanctuary, now felt like a war zone. Caleb, we need to talk about this, I said one evening after Emma and her brood had finally left. The living room looked like a tornado had hit it, toys strewn everywhere and mysterious stains on the carpet. He barely glanced up from his phone.
About what?
About Emma and her kids practically living here. It's disrupting everything. Caleb's eyes narrowed. They're going through a tough time, Eve. I thought you'd be more understanding. Understanding. I sputtered. I'm the one cleaning up their messes, cooking for them, trying to work from home with all this noise dash. Maybe if you had kids of your own, you'd be more patient, he snapped, his words cutting deep. I recoiled as if slapped. That's not fair, and you know it. But Caleb had already turned away, ending the conversation. I was left standing alone, surrounded by the debris of a life I no longer recognized. The next day, I was on a conference call when the doorbell rang. I ignored it, knowing Caleb would answer. Minutes later, shrieks of laughter pierced through my concentration. "Sorry, can you repeat that?" I asked my client, trying to mask my irritation. "I'm having some background noise issues." As soon as the call ended, I stormed downstairs. Emma's kids were running wild, with Emma herself lounging on the couch, scrolling through her phone. "Oh, Eve," she chirped, looking up. "I hope we're not bothering you." The kids were just so eager to come over. I forced a smile. "Actually, Emma, I'm working. It's a bit disruptive dash." "Eve." Caleb's sharp voice cut me off. He'd appeared in the doorway, frowning. A word. In the kitchen, he laid into me. "What's wrong with you? They're just kids having fun." "I'm trying to work, Caleb. This is my home office too."
He scoffed.
"Maybe if you made more of an effort to connect with them, you'd enjoy their company." I stared at him, disbelieving. When did I become the villain in my own home? But Caleb had already turned away, heading back to Emma and the kids. I watched as he sat next to her on the couch, their heads bent close in conversation, while the children continued their rampage. Days blurred into weeks. My work suffered as I struggled to maintain any semblance of order. Caleb grew more distant, spending every free moment with Emma and her kids. I became a ghost in my own home, retreating to our bedroom to escape the constant chaos. One evening, I overheard Caleb and Emma talking in hushed tones in the kitchen. "I don't know how much longer I can do this, Caleb was saying. "Eve's becoming impossible to live with." Emma's voice was soothing. "Oh, honey, you deserve so much better. Someone who understands you, supports you." I backed away, my heart pounding. The pieces were falling into place, the lingering touches, the private jokes, the way Caleb's eyes lit up whenever Emma entered the room. That night, as Caleb slept beside me, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The life I'd built was crumbling around me, and I felt powerless to stop it. I thought of my sister Hannah, of the rift between us that had seemed so insurmountable. Now, faced with the wreckage of my marriage, that old hurt seemed trivial. With trembling fingers, I reached for my phone. It was time to swallow my pride. As I typed out a message to Hannah, tears slid silently down my cheeks. I was done being a doormat. It was time to fight back. I woke to the sound of hushed voices and shuffling feet. Blinking away sleep, I found Caleb hastily packing a suitcase. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice thick with confusion. Caleb barely glanced at me. "Emma's going on a trip. I'm going with her to help with the kids." I sat up, suddenly wide awake.
"What?
"For how long?" "3 days," he replied, zipping up the bag. "Emma's dropping the kids off here in an hour. You'll need to watch them while we're gone." The room spun. "Caleb, you can't be serious. I have work, and I can't handle 3 kids alone for 3 days." He fixed me with a cold stare. "This isn't up for discussion, Eve. Emma needs help, and I'm going to be there for her. It's about time you stepped up and did something useful around here." Before I could respond, the doorbell rang. Caleb rushed downstairs, leaving me shell-shocked in our bedroom. I stumbled down after him, just in time to see Emma ushering her children inside. She beamed at me, all saccharine sweetness.
"Eve, darling."
"Thank you so much for doing this. You're a lifesaver." I opened my mouth to protest, but Caleb cut me off. "Of course she's happy to help. Right, Eve?" Trapped under their expectant gazes, I could only nod mutely. Emma clapped her hands together. "Wonderful. Kids, be good for Aunt Eve. Mommy and Uncle Caleb will be back in a few days." As Emma rattled off a list of instructions, dietary restrictions, bedtime routines, favorite toys, I felt my world tilting on its axis. This couldn't be happening. Before I knew it, Caleb and Emma were out the door, leaving me alone with 3 wide-eyed children and a sinking feeling in my stomach. The first day was a nightmare. Lucy refused to eat anything but ice cream. Ben dismantled my laptop to see how it works, and Riley had a meltdown because his favorite TV show wasn't on. By nightfall, I was at my wit's end. The house was a disaster zone. I'd missed 2 important work calls, and the kids were still running wild. As I slumped on the couch, my phone buzzed. It was Caleb. "How's everything going?" he asked, the sound of laughter and music in the background. "It's chaos," I admitted. "Caleb, I can't do this. Can you please come home?" His voice hardened. "Don't be dramatic, Eve. They're just kids. Figure it out." The line went dead. I stared at the phone, tears welling up. That's when I noticed a new text message from Hannah. "Hey sis, just checking in. How are you holding up?" My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Pride warred with desperation. Finally, I typed out a response. "Hannah, I need help. Can you come over?" Her reply was almost instantaneous. "On my way." An hour later, Hannah swept through the front door like a force of nature. She took one look at the chaos around us and sprang into action. "All right, troops," she called out to the kids. "Who wants to play a game?" To my amazement, the children gathered around her, hanging on her every word. Within minutes, she had them engaged in a cleanup competition, turning the mess into a game. As we worked side by side, Hannah turned to me. "Eve, what's really going on here?" The dam broke. Through tears, I told her everything. Caleb's emotional abuse, Emma's manipulation, my growing suspicions of their affair. Hannah listened, her face darkening with each revelation. When I finished, she pulled me into a fierce hug. "I'm so sorry, Eve. I should have been here for you. But I'm here now, and we're going to fix this." For the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope. As we tackled the chaos together, a plan began to form in my mind. Caleb and Emma thought they could walk all over me, but they had no idea what was coming. With Hannah by my side, I was ready to fight back. The tables were about to turn, and I couldn't wait to see their faces when they returned to find their little game was over. The next morning, I woke to the smell of pancakes and the sound of laughter. For a moment, I thought I was dreaming. Then I remembered Hannah was here. I padded downstairs to find my sister at the stove, flipping pancakes with expert ease. Emma's children sat at the table, quietly coloring as they waited for breakfast. "Morning, sleepyhead," Hannah grinned. "Hope you're hungry." As we ate, Hannah outlined her plan. "First, we establish a routine. Kids thrive on structure. Then, we'll tackle this house. By the time Caleb and Emma return, they won't recognize the place or the kids." Over the next 2 days, Hannah worked miracles. She implemented a chore chart, turning cleaning into a game. She set up a reward system for good behavior and consequences for breaking rules. The children, starved for attention and discipline, responded enthusiastically. While Hannah managed the kids, I threw myself into work, catching up on missed deadlines. For the first time in months, I felt productive, energized. On the 3rd day, as Hannah and I sat on the porch watching the kids play in the yard, she turned to me with a serious expression. "Eve, we need to talk about what happens when Caleb comes back." I sighed, the bubble of peace bursting. "I know. I don't know what to do." Hannah squeezed my hand. "You can't keep living like this. It's time to fight back." She was right, of course. But the thought of confronting Caleb terrified me. What if he left me? What if? My thoughts were interrupted by a shout from inside. We rushed in to find Ben standing by Caleb's open laptop, looking confused. "Aunt Eve, why does Uncle Caleb have pictures of Mommy in his computer?" My blood ran cold. Hannah gently moved Ben aside as I approached the laptop. There, in full view, was a folder labeled M. With shaking hands, I clicked it open. Dozens of intimate photos of Emma filled the screen. Emails detailing secret rendezvous. Bank statements showing large transfers to an unknown account. "Oh, Eve," Hannah breathed. "I'm so sorry." I felt numb. Part of me had known, of course. But seeing the evidence laid bare, it was devastating. As Hannah ushered the kids out of the room, I sank into Caleb's chair, my mind racing. This was it, the proof I needed. But what would I do with it? Hannah returned, her face set with determination. "We need to make copies of everything. Then we call a lawyer." I nodded, still in shock. As Hannah worked on backing up the files, I noticed an email draft Caleb had left open. My eyes widened as I read it. "Hannah," I called, my voice shaking. "Look at this." The email detailed plans for Caleb and Emma to move to another state, taking the kids with them. They were planning to leave in just 2 weeks. "That son of a datch," Hannah cut herself off, glancing at the kids in the next room. "Eve, we need to act fast." She was right. The numbness was fading, replaced by a burning anger. Caleb thought he could discard me like yesterday's trash? He had another thing coming. "Okay," I said, standing up straighter. "What's our next move?" Hannah's eyes gleamed with a mix of pride and determination. "First, we secure all this evidence. Then, we prepare for their return. They think they're coming back to a meek, overwhelmed Eve. Let's show them how wrong they are." As we worked late into the night, planning our strategy, I felt a strange mix of emotions, fear, anger, but also a growing sense of empowerment. For too long, I'd been a victim in my own life. It was time to take control. When Caleb and Emma returned tomorrow, they'd find a very different Eve waiting for them. And I couldn't wait to see the looks on their faces. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway sent a jolt through my body. Hannah squeezed my hand reassuringly as we heard the front door open. "Eve, we're back." Caleb's voice rang out, a note of surprise evident as he took in the spotless living room. I stepped out of the kitchen, Hannah close behind me. Caleb and Emma stood in the entryway, their smiles faltering as they registered our united front. "Welcome back," I said, my voice steady. "How was your trip?" Caleb's eyes darted between Hannah and me. "What's going on here? Why is Hannah here?" Before I could respond, Emma's children came bounding down the stairs, their faces alight with excitement.
Mom.
"Uncle Caleb, look what we made." Lucy held up a colorful chart. "It's our chore wheel. Aunt Eve and Aunt Hannah helped us make it." Emma's smile looked strained as she examined the chart. "That's nice, sweetie. Why don't you all go play upstairs while the grown-ups talk?" "But Mom," Ben protested, "we have to finish our homework first. That's the rule now." Emma's eyebrows shot up. "Rule? What rule?" "The rules Aunt Eve and Aunt Hannah made," Riley chimed in. "They're much better than your rules, Mom. We actually have fun now." I watched as Emma's face tightened, her eyes flashing with anger. Caleb stepped forward, his charm offensive in full swing. "Kids, listen to your mother. Go upstairs now." To everyone's surprise, it was Ben who spoke up. "No, Uncle Caleb. We don't have to do what you say anymore. Aunt Eve showed us the pictures on your computer. You're not a good person." The color drained from Caleb's face. Emma whirled on him, her voice shrill. "What pictures?" I stepped forward, my heart pounding but my resolve firm. "I think it's time we all had a talk. Kids, please go upstairs. Hannah will be up in a minute to help with homework." As Hannah ushered the children upstairs, I led Caleb and Emma into the living room. The tension was palpable as we sat down. "Eve, whatever you think you know," Caleb began, but I cut him off. "Save it, Caleb. I've seen everything. The photos, the emails, the bank statements. I know about your plans to leave with Emma and the kids." Emma's head snapped towards Caleb. "You told her?" "He didn't have to," I replied coldly. "You two weren't as careful as you thought." Caleb's face twisted with anger. "You had no right to go through my personal files, and you had no right to betray our marriage." I shot back, my voice rising. "Did you think I wouldn't find out? That I'd just roll over and let you walk all over me?" Emma stood up, her eyes wild. "This is ridiculous." "Come on, Caleb. Let's get the kids and go." "You're not taking those children anywhere," Hannah's voice rang out as she re-entered the room. "Not until we've sorted this mess out." Caleb jumped to his feet. "You can't stop us. They're Emma's kids." "Actually," I said, pulling out a folder, "I can. I've spoken to a lawyer. Given the evidence of your affair and your plans to flee the state with the children, we have grounds for an emergency custody order." Emma's face crumpled. "You can't do this. They're my children. Children you were perfectly happy to dump on me whenever it was convenient," I retorted. "Children who have flourished under proper care and attention in just 3 days." Caleb lunged forward, his face contorted with rage. You manipulative bitch. You planned this all along. Hannah stepped between us, her voice steel. Back off, Caleb. Unless you want assault charges added to your growing list of problems. As Caleb and Emma's world unraveled before my eyes, I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness. This wasn't how I'd imagined my marriage ending, but I knew it was necessary. So, what happens now? Emma asked, her voice small. I took a deep breath. Now, we're going to have a long, honest conversation about the future. And this time, I'm the one calling the shots. The tense silence that had settled over the room was shattered by the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. Caleb's face paled as he recognized the distinctive rumble of his father's vintage Cadillac. What the hell? He muttered, moving towards the window. Hannah shot me a knowing look. I nodded, steeling myself for what was to come. The doorbell rang, its cheerful chime a stark contrast to the atmosphere in the house. I moved to answer it, Caleb hot on my heels. Mom? Dad? What are you doing here? Caleb's voice cracked as he faced his parents on the doorstep. Margot and Richard Lawson stood there, concern etched on their faces. Hannah called us, Margot explained, her eyes darting between Caleb and me. She said there was an emergency. Caleb whirled on Hannah, his face contorted with rage. You had no right, Dash. She had every right, Richard cut in, his voice stern. Now, someone better start explaining what's going on here. As we all filed back into the living room, Emma tried to make a discreet exit. I should probably go check on the kids, Dash. Sit down, Emma, I said firmly. You're as much a part of this as anyone. Over the next hour, the whole sordid tale unfolded. I presented the evidence of Caleb and Emma's affair, the financial records showing Caleb's mismanagement of our joint accounts, and their plans to flee with Emma's children. Margot gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Caleb, how could you? Caleb's face was a mask of defiance.
You don't understand.
Eve and I were having problems. Emma was there for me, Dash. Don't you dare try to justify this, Richard thundered. We raised you better than this. As the reality of the situation sank in, Emma's composure began to crack. This isn't fair, she wailed. We love each other. You can't keep us apart. In a desperate move, she grabbed Caleb's hand and made a dash for the stairs. Let's just get the kids and go. We don't have to explain ourselves to anyone. But Caleb's parents were quicker. Richard blocked the staircase while Margot positioned herself by the front door. You're not going anywhere, Richard said, his voice low and dangerous. Not until we've sorted out this mess you've created. Caleb's shoulders slumped in defeat.
Fine.
What do you want from me? Richard's eyes were cold as he addressed his son. First, you're going to sign over control of all your accounts to your mother and me. We'll make sure Eve gets what she's owed in the divorce. Divorce? Caleb sputtered. Who said anything about divorce? I stepped forward, my voice steady. I did. It's over, Caleb. I won't be your doormat anymore. Margot nodded approvingly. Good for you, Eve. And as for you, she turned to Emma, I suggest you start thinking about what's best for your children. Because from what I've seen, it certainly isn't you. Emma crumpled to the floor, sobbing. Caleb stood frozen, the reality of his actions finally sinking in. Richard turned to me, his expression softening. Eve, I want you to know that Margot and I support you completely. We'll make sure you're taken care of during and after the divorce proceedings. I felt tears prick my eyes. Thank you. That means more than you know. As Hannah wrapped an arm around my shoulders, I realized that this was it. The moment everything changed. The life I had known was over, but a new one was just beginning. Caleb made one last, desperate attempt. Mom, Dad, please. You can't just cut me off. I'm your son. Richard's voice was heavy with disappointment. A son we no longer recognize. Until you make this right, until you show true remorse for your actions, consider yourself disowned. The finality of those words hung in the air. As Caleb and Emma's world crumbled around them, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The road ahead would be challenging, but for the first time in years, I felt hope. I caught Hannah's eye and saw my own determination reflected there. Whatever came next, I knew I wouldn't face it alone. 6 months after that fateful confrontation, I stood in my new apartment, surrounded by moving boxes and the promise of a fresh start. The divorce had been finalized last week, thanks in large part to the unwavering support of Caleb's parents and my sister Hannah. I ran my hand along the smooth surface of my desk, a parting gift from Margot and Richard. To new beginnings, the card had read. Their kindness still overwhelmed me at times. A knock at the door pulled me from my reverie. Hannah's smiling face greeted me as I opened it. "Ready for your first day at the new job, sis?" she asked, stepping inside. I nodded, a mix of excitement and nervousness fluttering in my stomach. As ready as I'll ever be. As we drove across the city, Hannah filled me in on the latest developments. Emma's kids are doing great with their new therapist. The court-mandated visitations are going smoothly, and Emma seems to be making an effort to be a better mother. I felt a pang of sympathy for the children I'd grown to care for during those chaotic days. And Caleb, Hannah's expression hardened. Last I heard, he's still trying to win back his parents' approval. The affair with Emma fell apart pretty quickly once the money dried up. I nodded, surprised at how little I felt at the mention of my ex-husband's name. The anger and hurt that had consumed me for so long had faded, replaced by a sense of peace and purpose. As we pulled up to my new workplace, a bustling nonprofit focused on supporting victims of domestic abuse, Hannah squeezed my hand. "You've got this, Eve. I'm so proud of you." Tears pricked my eyes. "I couldn't have done any of this without you, Hannah. Thank you for being there when I needed you most." She pulled me into a fierce hug. "That's what sisters are for. Now go show them what you're made of." As I walked into the building, head held high, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. The pain, the betrayal, the moments of despair, they had all led to this new chapter in my life. My first day flew by in a whirlwind of introductions, orientations, and the exhilarating feeling of being part of something meaningful. As I packed up to leave, my new boss, Sarah, stopped by my desk. "Eve, I just wanted to say how impressed I am with your passion and insight. Your personal experience will be invaluable in helping other women find their strength." I smiled, feeling a warmth spread through my chest.
Thank you, Sarah.
This work, it means everything to me. That evening, as I sat on my small balcony watching the sunset, I pulled out my journal. It had been my constant companion throughout the divorce, a place to pour out my fears and hopes. I began to write, "Dear future Eve, today marks the beginning of a new journey. I want you to remember how far you've come. The woman who felt trapped and worthless in a loveless marriage is gone. In her place stands someone stronger, wiser, and full of purpose. Never forget the lessons you've learned.
1,
Your worth is not determined by anyone else's opinion of you.
2,
It's okay to ask for help when you need it.
3,
True family stands by you, even when it's difficult.
4,
You are capable of more than you ever imagined. Whatever challenges lie ahead, face them with the same courage and determination that brought you here. Your past does not define you, but it has shaped you into the resilient woman you are today. The future is yours to shape. Make it a beautiful one, with love and pride."
Eve.
As I closed the journal, I felt a sense of closure wash over me. The scars of my past would always be a part of me, but they no longer held me captive. Instead, they served as a reminder of my strength and resilience. I looked out at the city skyline, alive with possibilities. For the first time in years, I felt truly free. The road ahead might be uncertain, but I was ready to face it head-on, armed with self-love, the support of true family, and the unshakable belief in my own worth. This wasn't just an ending. It was a new beginning, and I couldn't wait to see where it would lead.
My savings, which I have accumulated through hard work since my single days, were meant to be untouched for our children's future. I never expected those savings to be used for such a thing. Just because we're married doesn't mean anything goes. My name is Alyssa, and I'm 32 years old. I married Greg when I was 24, and I got pregnant soon after. We now have 2 children. My son is 7 and my daughter is 5. Both are growing up healthy without any major illnesses. When my daughter turned 3, I returned to my previous job. 2 years have passed since I resumed work, and now I earn about the same salary as Greg. Since he only contributes the bare minimum to our living expenses, I have to save for myself and our children from my own salary. I really wish Greg would cooperate more. However, whenever I bring up money, he always looks annoyed and even gets grumpy with the children. So, I've stopped talking about money in front of him. Then one day, my sister-in-law Megan came to our house. I happened to be working from home that day. "Alyssa, please. Let me stay with you for a while." As soon as I opened the door, Megan burst into tears and clung to me. Confused by the suddenness, I was perplexed. "Wait, what's going on? My husband wants a divorce." "What? A divorce?" Megan was still single when Greg and I got married. And she only got married a year ago to a man who seemed very kind and worked for a corporation. They looked so happy at their wedding. But now, just a year later, they are talking about divorce. I couldn't just leave her crying, so I let her into the house. I decided to hear her out first. "Well, Megan, I know it's tough, but why suddenly a divorce?" Sniffling, Megan opened up. "I haven't done anything wrong. But he suddenly says he can't stand living with me anymore." "Isn't that terrible?" "What? Your husband said that? Don't you think it's awful?" "You must think I'm pitiable, right, Alyssa?" She pressed me intensely, making me feel undue pressure. However, it's hard to believe that her kind husband would propose divorce without any reason. I managed to calm her down and decided to wait for Greg to come home from work. When Greg returned, we put the kids to bed and started discussing with Megan. "So, Megan, why has it come to divorce?" As Greg asked, Megan began crying again. "I want to know that too. I've been working hard for him all this time. And yet, he says it's impossible to live with you. Isn't that cruel?" Despite her saying that, there's no way her husband would come up with such an idea without a reason. Listening to her alone won't solve anything. Megan has always had a selfish and willful side. That might be why this divorce is happening. "Well, Megan, are you sure there's really no reason at all? Your husband isn't the type to be unreasonable." As I gently defended her husband, Megan glared at me sharply. "What, Alyssa? Are you taking his side over mine? I've been working hard as a wife. And yet he's pushing me towards divorce." "No. It's not about taking sides. But I doubt he would bring up divorce without any reason. What do you know about him, Alyssa? You're defending him too much." After a pause, Megan looked at me suspiciously. "Oh, don't tell me, Alyssa, you're not having an affair with him, are you?" "What? No way." Oh my, the conversation has taken a strange turn. Of course, there's nothing untoward between Megan's husband and me. I don't even have his contact information. Thankfully, Greg also chimed in. "Megan, that's not possible." "Don't worry." And I felt a bit relieved. Still, it's curious. Despite Megan claiming she worked hard as a wife, she is vague about why she is facing divorce. I asked Greg to urgently invite his brother over. Megan had already left, saying she didn't want to meet him. Upon arrival, Megan's husband apologized right away, saying, "Sorry for causing trouble for you too." I decided to delve into the details because it seemed unlikely. Such a reasonable person would ask for a divorce without cause. Well, I'm sorry to ask so suddenly, but why did you bring up divorce with Megan? Megan's husband looked troubled and looked down. Did you perhaps cheat on her? Hey, Greg. How can you say such a thing? I scolded Greg for his inappropriate comment. After a moment, Megan's husband finally spoke up. Actually, Megan has spent all of my savings, about $50,000. $50,000. I exclaimed, shocked by the amount. He hadn't been upfront because it involved money, which isn't a pretty topic. $50,000. What did she spend it on? I asked cautiously, and he sighed deeply. I asked her, but she only said it was for living expenses. I've been giving her a fixed amount every month for living expenses. But she said it wasn't enough. Feeling apologetic, I thought to myself, it's believable Megan would do this. Because she had also nonchalantly asked us for money during her single days. She'd say, "We're family, right?" and even went through my wallet without asking. Knowing this side of Megan, I found her husband's story all too plausible. He slumped in disappointment. If she can explain what she spent my savings on and agrees to repay it, I'd consider pausing the divorce. But she keeps insisting it was for living expenses. I felt terribly sorry for Megan's husband. They don't even have children. And he was giving Megan an allowance. It's suspicious that she spent $50,000 in just a year. Eventually, Greg spoke up. So, if she returns the money, the divorce could be avoided? Yeah. Got it, I'll talk to her about it. Greg took on the responsibility, but I wondered how Megan, a homemaker, planned to repay the money. I wondered if he was going to repay in place of her. After sending Megan's husband off, Megan returned home. What happened? What did he say? As Megan bombarded him with questions, Greg confidently replied, "If you return the $50,000 you spent, he won't ask for a divorce." To which Megan firmly responded, "How could I possibly have that kind of money? I only used it for living expenses and did nothing wrong." It's unclear if Megan really spent it all on living expenses. But her insistence that she's completely blameless is troubling. Megan's husband's decision to propose divorce seems reasonable. Just then, Greg said something outrageous. "Don't worry, Megan, Alyssa has lots of savings." What? I exclaimed involuntarily as my money was taken for granted. Megan's eyes lit up as she turned to me. Really? Alyssa, you should have said something sooner. No way, this is wrong. What are they even saying? Especially Greg, damn husband. He can't just decide to use someone else's savings. After cursively reprimanding them in my mind, I calmed down and firmly declined. Well, I can't lend you my savings. If you really need money, ask Greg. Upon hearing this, Greg inexplicably lashed out. Hey Alyssa. Megan is really struggling. Don't you want to help her? Exactly, Alyssa. With your savings, I could avoid divorcing my husband. Both Greg and Megan were now spouting nonsense, proving they were indeed siblings. I genuinely sympathized with Megan's husband and thought it might be better for him to get a divorce sooner rather than later. Greg, not liking my stance, exploded again. Are you serious, Alyssa? When my sister, our family, is struggling, you can't even lend just $50,000. Just $50,000. When he said that, something inside me snapped. I felt my body heat up as anger surged through me. Just $50,000. Don't be ridiculous. This money I saved up from my single days. Why should I use it for your sister who squandered her husband's money? I've always said it's for our children's future. I managed to hold back my trembling body. Megan stood there with her mouth agape, overwhelmed. Greg looked shocked but quickly retorted. Well, you can just save up again. Megan needs that money now. Are you kidding me? I don't care. I spat back fiercely. Then you lend her the money if it's so important. You're her real sibling. And isn't it embarrassing to ask your wife to solve your sister's problems? What? Greg turned red with anger, biting his lip, unable to respond. Fine. I want a divorce from such a heartless woman. Divorce? You mean you and me? That's right. I don't need a heartless woman who won't help family. Suddenly, he rummaged through a drawer and pulled out divorce papers. He signed them and stamped them right in front of me. Here, sign this quickly. So he kept such documents just in case. I was worried about our children. Taking them away from their father was concerning. He smirked at me, perhaps thinking I wouldn't go through with it. You can't do it, can you? You wouldn't dare become a single mother suddenly. Would you? Better to lend my sister the $50,000, right? At that moment, everything became irrelevant. I was done. Better to be a single mother than to deal with such ridiculous siblings. I signed the divorce papers and stamped them. What? Alyssa. He seemed truly shocked that I had signed. Tomorrow, I'll file these. I started packing my things and the kids silently. Greg, panicking, asked, Alyssa, you're really going to file that? Of course. Why wouldn't I? Why so casually? Didn't you give it to me to sign first? Well, yes, but... The next morning, I submitted the divorce papers to the court first thing. Greg and Megan probably hadn't slept much, as they looked completely worn out. I told the children, let's go to Grandpa and Grandma's house. And prepared them for the move. It seemed cruel to suddenly tell them about the divorce. Especially since they are still so young. I planned to explain things to them calmly and simply once we had settled down a bit. When I was leaving with the children, Greg had tears in his eyes. Alyssa, you're coming back, right? This isn't really going to end in divorce, is it? But it is. It's too late to cancel it now. From now on, please indulge your beloved sister to your heart's content and support each other. I said this with heavy sarcasm, throwing the words back at him. However, I truly felt sorry for the children. Due to our selfish reasons, they were losing their father and the home they had lived in. Nevertheless, if I had continued to let those two dictate my life, my savings would have been devoured. And even the future of these children would have been at risk. I refused to have my life thrown into disarray by such unreasonable siblings. I moved back to my parents' house, where I explained the situation and asked to stay for a while. After explaining things in simple terms, the children accepted the situation, saying, as long as Mom is with us, that's fine. And Mom has always been there for us. Greg kept contacting me persistently after that, but now I block all his calls. The divorce has already been finalized. And I plan to hire a lawyer to ensure child support payments. Meanwhile, Megan and her husband also divorced soon after. She claimed to have used the savings for living expenses, but it turned out she had been splurging on luxury brands. when Megan's husband secretly searched her room. He was shocked to find a large stash of luxury goods. As a result, she was forced into divorce and had to reimburse the $50,000 she had spent, without mercy. She managed to return about $20,000 with what was left of Greg's modest savings. But she will have to work to pay back the remaining $30,000. Now that the divorce is settled, I have to pay the property division. Please help me. She tried to appeal to her parents with her usual crying antics. But since I had already explained everything to them, they quickly refused her. Not only Megan, but Greg too was severely reprimanded. And they both ended up being disowned. Really, those siblings are beyond saving. At least I hope they manage without causing trouble for others. I'm truly glad that Greg and Megan didn't end up taking it from me. I will continue to use this money carefully to ensure my children grow up well.
I'll be staying here from now on. Get used to it. I nearly dropped my purse. Lorraine's voice cut through the air like a bad joke fallen flat. What? Since when? Kevin stood to the side, shifting on his feet, avoiding my eyes. He tried to muster a weak smile. Mom needed a place, Elena. She'll stay with us for a while. I could feel my blood boiling. A place? Kevin, we didn't discuss this. Lorraine rolled her eyes, a smirk flickering across her face. There's no need to raise your voice. It's family business. I glanced at Kevin, searching for some sign of solidarity. He simply shrugged, looking anywhere but at me. She doesn't have anywhere else to go, he muttered. Anger rose in my chest. So you just decide this without asking me? Kevin sighed, walking past me to grab a can of soda from the kitchen. Look, let's not make this a huge deal, okay? It's temporary. Lorraine settled herself on the couch, flipping through a magazine like she owned the place. I clenched my fists, resisting the urge to scream. Temporary? And how long is temporary exactly? Kevin opened the soda, taking a sip. We'll figure it out. She's family, Elena. I turned away, fighting the tears that threatened to spill. Nothing about this felt right. The house I had worked so hard to make our home was now invaded without a second thought. I glanced back at Kevin, hoping for a glimmer of understanding. Kevin, I need to talk to you, alone. He finally looked at me, his face a mix of annoyance and fatigue. Fine, he said, putting down his drink. Let's talk. We walked to the backyard, where the evening air did little to cool my anger. You can't just bring her here without any discussion, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Kevin rubbed the back of his neck. Elena, it's not that simple. She's my mother. I didn't want to sound heartless, but I felt cornered. I understand, but this is our home too. We're supposed to make these decisions together. He gave me a tired look. I thought you'd understand. The sting of those words cut deep. Kevin, that's not fair. I'm trying to understand, but you can't expect me to accept this without talking about it. He shrugged again, as if that single gesture could dissolve my frustration. Look, just give it time. She won't be a problem. I glared at him, unable to fathom his nonchalance. Won't be a problem. She's already taken over the living room. Kevin threw his hands up in surrender. I can't throw her out, Elena. That's all I'm saying. With that, he walked back inside, leaving me fuming in the backyard. The sinking realization dawned on me. My voice didn't matter. Kevin had made up his mind, and Lorraine had dug her heels in. As I stood there, I took a deep breath, my determination solidifying. I would not let this go uncontested. Stepping back inside, I shot a glare at Lorraine. She met my eyes with a cold smile. This is not over, I whispered, mainly to myself. The house, my sanctuary, had become a battleground, and the war had just begun. I can't believe this is happening, I muttered to myself as I left for work the next morning. My best friend Sandra called just as I pulled into the parking lot. Elena, how was your trip? She asked cheerfully. It was fine, but I came back to a nightmare. What do you mean? Her voice grew serious. Kevin's mom moved in, just like that. No discussion, no warning, I said, biting back my frustration. Sandra sighed. You've got to be kidding me. Didn't he even talk to you about it? Nope, it was all decided while I was gone. Sandra was quiet for a moment. You need to lay down some boundaries, Elena. This isn't okay. I know, I said, parking the car and grabbing my bag. It's just complicated. I get it. Just remember, you don't have to put up with this forever, she said, trying to reassure me. Entering the office, I tried to focus on work, but my mind kept drifting back home. Memories flooded in about when Kevin and I first met at this very office. Kevin, the charming graphic designer, always had a way of making everyone laugh. Our romance had been quick and intense. We married after just a year of dating, certain we could handle anything together. Then Lorraine revealed her true colors. Sweet and supportive before the wedding, she turned critical and manipulative once the rings were on our fingers. Kevin, forever the peacemaker, never stood up to her. I'll never forget the first time she openly disapproved of me. Are you sure you can handle Kevin's work hours, Alina? Maybe you should rethink this career of yours, she said, smirking as if she was genuinely concerned. Of course, Kevin and I manage just fine, I had replied, masking my irritation. Kevin had shrugged the comment off, claiming she meant no harm, but the seeds of doubt she planted grew each day. Returning home that evening, I found Lorraine rearranging the kitchen. What are you doing? I couldn't hide my annoyance. Just making it more practical. You had it all wrong, she replied nonchalantly. I clenched my jaw, taking a deep breath. I like it the way it is. Lorraine's voice dripped with false sweetness. Oh, sweetie, you'll see it's better this way. Stepping into the living room, I saw Kevin on his laptop. Kevin, we need to talk, now. He looked up, clearly sensing the tension. What is it? Lorraine is taking over the house. We need to set some boundaries. Kevin sighed, rubbing his temples. Alina, can't you just try and get along with her? It's hard for her, too. I stared at him in disbelief. Are you kidding me? She's acting like this place is hers. She's just trying to help, he replied weakly. Help? By undermining everything I do? I snapped. Kevin stood up, frustration lining his face. Why do you always have to blow things out of proportion? Rare anger bubbled inside me. Blow things out of proportion? You're seriously siding with her? He threw his hands up. I'm not taking sides, I just want some peace. Furious, I stormed out to the backyard. My home felt like a stranger's house, my voice unheard, my feelings disregarded. But I knew deep down this wasn't living. As the night fell, I steeled myself. This wouldn't be swept under the rug. Something had to change, and I would make sure of it. Kevin's passive nature had pushed me to the edge, but I wouldn't fall off. Not yet. Not without a fight. The days blurred into a nightmare. I barely recognized my own house. Lorraine's presence was overpowering. She critiqued everything I did, from how I cooked to how I decorated. Kevin stayed silent through it all, brushing off my concerns like dust on a shelf. One morning, as I sipped my coffee, Lorraine strutted into the kitchen. Alina, I noticed you've been spending a lot on groceries. Maybe you should cut back a bit. I stared at her, biting my tongue until it nearly bled. Lorraine, we buy what we need. She smirked, shaking her head. I'd manage this household differently, but I guess it's your call. Just as I opened my mouth to retort, Kevin walked in. I turned to him. Kevin, do you hear this? He looked between us, clearly uncomfortable. Mom's just trying to help. I slammed my cup down, coffee spilling. Trying to help by undermining me? Kevin sighed, the lines on his face deepening. Why do you always have to make a scene? Lorraine's eyes twinkled with satisfaction. She had him wrapped around her finger. Frustrated, I stormed out of the kitchen. The next day, while I was at work, I got a text from Kevin. We need to talk tonight. Anxiety gnawed at me. When I got home, Lorraine's smug glance followed me as I walked into the living room. Kevin was sitting there, looking stern. Alina, Mom needs money. I've already given her some, but she needs more. My jaw dropped. She needs more. We have bills, Kevin. He rubbed his forehead. I know, but she's family. She's in a tough spot. I turned to Lorraine, who was lounging on the couch, looking unbothered. Can't she find a job or? Lorraine cut me off. I've done my fair share of work. It's time for my son to take care of me. My patience snapped. Kevin, this is not right or fair. You're putting our future at risk. Kevin's face turned red. She's my mother, Elena. She comes first. Tears stung my eyes as I realized where his loyalty lay. What about us, Kevin? What about our life? He stood up, clenching his fists. Maybe you should think about being more supportive. I left the living room, heart pounding with anger and betrayal. The conversation kept replaying in my mind. Kevin's unwavering support for Lorraine and his blatant disregard for our needs. Sandra called that evening. "How are you holding up?" "Not well," I admitted. "Lorraine wants money now, and Kevin's ready to give it to her." Sandra's voice brimmed with outrage. "That's insane. You need to put your foot down, Elena." "It's not that easy," I sighed. "He won't listen to me." "Then make him listen. You can't keep sacrificing your happiness." Her words echoed in my mind long after we hung up. The next morning I confronted Kevin again. "We need to talk about finances. This has to stop." Kevin rolled his eyes. "We'll be fine." Desperation gripped me. "Kevin, you're jeopardizing everything we've worked for." He shrugged. "She's family. You're the one being unreasonable." Anger surged through me. This is my home too. I will not be pushed aside. Walking away from that conversation, I knew things had to change. I couldn't let Lorraine dictate our lives, and if Kevin refused to stand by me, I'd find a way to reclaim my power, no matter the cost. The battle lines were drawn, and I was ready to fight for what was rightfully ours. The escalation had only just begun. I came home late from work one evening, hoping for some semblance of peace. Instead, I walked into Lorraine and Kevin in the middle of a heated discussion. "It's not done right, Kevin," Lorraine was saying. "Elena doesn't know how to manage this house properly." Kevin looked up as I entered, his expression shifting from annoyance to exasperation. "Mom thinks the house isn't clean enough," he said, as if that were the biggest problem we had. Lorraine turned to me, hands on her hips. "Elena, couldn't you at least try to keep this place decent?" I dropped my bag on the floor, barely containing my fury. "I have a full-time job, Lorraine. I can't spend every minute cleaning." Lorraine huffed. "When I was your age, I managed just fine." That was the last straw. "This isn't about cleaning. You just want to control everything." Kevin stepped between us, his voice rising. "Elena, calm down. Mom's just trying to help." "Help? By criticizing everything I do? This is my home, Kevin. Our home." Lorraine scoffed. "You're overreacting. Maybe if you learned some respect." Before she could finish, I cut her off. "Respect? You moved in unannounced, rearranged my kitchen, demanded money, and now you're criticizing how I maintain my home. How is that respectful?" Kevin's face turned red with frustration. "Elena, why can't you see that she's just looking out for us?" I could have screamed from the hopelessness of it all. "Looking out for us? She's making me feel like a guest in my own house." Lorraine threw her hands in the air. "If you're that unhappy, maybe you should leave." I stared at her, stunned. Turning to Kevin, I waited for him to defend me, but he remained silent. My heart sank. "Is that what you want too, Kevin? For me to leave?" He avoided my gaze, his silence louder than any words. Tears threatened, but I held them back. "Fine. If you want me to leave, just say it." Kevin finally spoke, but his words hit like a brick. "Maybe you need to learn some respect for family, or leave if you can't handle basic family expectations." The air was thick with tension as I turned on my heel and stormed out of the house. I needed space, air, anything but the walls that felt like they were closing in on me. Sandra's comforting voice was the only thing that made sense as I paced outside, phone pressed to my ear. "He actually said that?" she gasped. "Yes, basically told me to leave," I whispered, the hurt palpable. "Elena, you deserve better than this. If he won't see that, then maybe it's time to rethink things." Her words rang true, but they also scared me. Could I really walk away from 10 years with Kevin, from the home we built? When I finally came back inside, Kevin and Lorraine's voices could still be heard, low and conspiratorial. They didn't notice me slip upstairs, my mind swirling with conflicting thoughts. Lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. I knew I couldn't go on like this. Kevin's spinelessness and Lorraine's incessant meddling were driving me to the edge. Sleep didn't come easily that night, but as exhaustion finally took over, one thing was clear. I needed to stand up for myself. I couldn't let them trample over my life without consequence. The battle wasn't just Lorraine's intrusion, it was about reclaiming my own dignity and worth. Morning broke with a sense of grim determination. I had a conference trip coming up, and it felt like the last chance to find some perspective. Kevin was already at the kitchen table when I came downstairs. "We need to talk," he said, as if last night hadn't been a breaking point. "Not now, Kevin. I've got a plane to catch," I said, moving past him. He grabbed my arm gently. "We'll work this out, I promise." I looked at him, searching for sincerity. We'll see about that. As I left the house, the weight of the impending decisions hung heavy, but I knew one thing for sure: change was coming, one way or another. The conference trip was a welcome escape. For a few days I immersed myself in work, trying to forget about the chaos at home. But as soon as I landed back at the airport, reality crashed back in. I got a text from Kevin. "We need to talk when you get home." Dread settled in my stomach as I walked through the door. Lorraine was in the kitchen, moving pots and pans around as if she could further assert her control over our space. "Welcome back," Lorraine said with a smirk. "Did you enjoy your trip?" "Spare me," I muttered, too tired to engage. Kevin was pacing in the living room. When he saw me, he stopped. "We need to talk now, Elena." I dropped my bags. "Fine, talk." He glanced uneasily at Lorraine before speaking. "Mom and I have been discussing our situation. We think you need to make some changes." "Changes?" I crossed my arms, ready for the next blow. Lorraine interjected. "You need to learn to respect family, and clearly, you're struggling with that." I felt like I was being gaslit. Respect goes both ways, Lorraine. You've done nothing but disrespect me since you got here." Kevin stepped in defensively. "Mom's just trying to help us make this work." I couldn't hold back anymore. "Kevin, are you even listening to yourself? She's tearing us apart." Lorraine put on her most innocent face. "Oh, please, you're just blowing things out of proportion." I snapped. "You're manipulating Kevin and trying to control our lives. What exactly is your endgame here?" Kevin's face turned pale. "Elena, stop. We're supposed to be a family. A family that respects each other," I shot back. "And right now I feel like I've been completely disrespected and disregarded." Kevin's face contorted with frustration. "Maybe you need to spend some time away to clear your head." I was stunned. "Do you even hear what you're saying? You want me to leave my own home?" Lorraine smirked, clearly enjoying the show. "Maybe a little time apart would do you both some good." The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Kevin broke it. "Maybe she's right. I think it's best if you take some time to cool off." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of betrayal. If I leave, I'm not coming back until things change. Kevin looked away, unable to meet my gaze. "Do what you need to do, Elena." I turned, grabbing my bags, and walked out the door. It wasn't until I was outside that the tears came. As heart-wrenching as it was also liberating. For too long I had tolerated being second to Lorraine's manipulations. Sandra was at her door before I even rang the bell. "Elena, what's happened now?" "Kevin wants me to leave," I managed between sobs. He sided with Lorraine again. Sandra pulled me into a comforting hug. "You've done the right thing. You deserve better." As days turned into a week, I settled into Sandra's spare bedroom. The sting of Kevin's betrayal was sharp, but the time away also gave me clarity. I began consulting with Mark, a trusted lawyer, discussing my options. During one of our meetings, Mark looked up from his papers. "You know, Elena, the house is legally yours." I blinked, processing his words. "What do you mean?" "Kevin never updated the deed after you purchased it. Legally, you hold the title." A spark of hope flickered. "So I could." "Yes," Mark confirmed. "You have the power here. Use it wisely." Armed with this knowledge, I prepared for the next battle. Kevin and Lorraine needed a wake-up call, and I was more than ready to give it to them. My time of feeling powerless was over. It was time to reclaim what was rightfully mine. I returned home with a resolve I hadn't felt in years. As I walked through the front door, the silence struck me. It was clear Lorraine and Kevin knew something was up. I found them both in the living room, Kevin on the couch, Lorraine in the armchair. Both turned to face me as I entered. Kevin spoke first, his voice betraying his nervousness. "Elena, where have you been?" I didn't waste any time. "Kevin, Lorraine, sit down. We need to talk." Lorraine's eyes narrowed. "About what? Think you can come in here and start making demands?" I ignored her, focusing on Kevin. "This ends now, Kevin. Lorraine's constant meddling, the financial drain, everything." Kevin's brows furrowed. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying this situation is unbearable. Lorraine's presence and your constant support of her over our marriage is unacceptable." Lorraine stood up, her face a mask of feigned innocence. "Oh, I see. So now it's all my fault?" "Every part of it," I stated bluntly. "I've tried to be reasonable, but you've taken over our home, criticized me constantly, and pushed me to the breaking point." Kevin sighed deeply. Elena, we've been over this. She's family. I took a deep breath. Well, here's the thing, Kevin. The house is in my name. Legally, I own this place. Both Kevin and Lorraine froze, their faces pale. What? Kevin muttered, disbelief painting his features. You heard me, and with that, I have the final say on who stays and who goes. Lorraine scoffed, trying to regain her composure. You wouldn't dare. I looked straight at Kevin. If you want to stay in this marriage, Lorraine needs to go. Now. Kevin stammered. Elena, you can't just... Yes, I can, I interrupted. This is my home, and I'm done being pushed around. Lorraine's eyes were on fire. You ungrateful little... Enough, I shouted. Leave, now. Kevin stood up, trying to placate. Elena, can't we discuss this? No, Kevin. I have tried to discuss, to compromise, but you both have taken advantage of my patience. He glanced at his mother, despair clouding his eyes. Mom, maybe it's best if you find somewhere else to stay for a while. Lorraine's face twisted in rage. What? You're kicking me out? Kevin looked down, avoiding her gaze. Maybe just for a little while, until things calm down. She turned to me, venom in her voice. You'll regret this. I met her look with defiance. No, Lorraine, I think this is exactly what I need to do. Kevin's shoulders slumped as Lorraine stormed off to pack her things. He finally looked at me, desperation in his eyes. Elena, I cut him off. Kevin, I love you. But your blind allegiance to your mother has pushed us to this breaking point. Things need to change or we're over. Lorraine brushed past us with her bags, shooting daggers with her eyes. This isn't the end, Elena. Remember that. I didn't flinch. Goodbye, Lorraine. After she slammed the door, the house fell into an eerie silence. Kevin and I stood there, the distance between us growing. This wasn't going to be fixed overnight. If Kevin couldn't adjust, I knew I'd have to walk away for good. For now, though, a heavy weight lifted from my shoulders. The battle wasn't completely won, but the most reinforcing battle had been. And I felt stronger for it. The next steps were uncertain, but I was ready to face them head-on. Kevin was unusually quiet in the days following Lorraine's departure. Tension hung in the air like a storm about to break. His silence was heavy, his movements slow, and it was clear he was struggling to process everything. One evening, while we were having dinner, he finally spoke up. Elena, I never wanted it to get this bad. I looked at him, wanting to believe there was genuine regret. Kevin, it's not just about wanting or not wanting. It's about actions and consequences. You've allowed your mother to disrespect me for years. He sighed, pushing his food around on his plate. I know, but I didn't know how to stop her. By standing up to her, Kevin, by putting our marriage first, I said, my voice firmer than I felt. You're right, he admitted, sadly. I've been a coward. The admission felt like a small victory, but I wasn't about to let him off easy. Kevin, I need you to understand that things have to change. If they don't, we won't survive this. He looked up, his eyes pleading. I'll do whatever it takes, Elena. Just tell me what to do. I took a deep breath. We need professional help, counseling, and you need to rebuild the trust that's been shattered. Kevin nodded, slowly. I'll make an appointment tomorrow. The next few days were filled with cold, practical coexistence. We barely spoke outside of necessity. I needed space to heal, and Kevin seemed to need time to regain his footing. Then, another bombshell hit. Lorraine started calling, leaving messages. Kevin ignored them at first, but one evening he played them all at once, his face pale. Lorraine's voice was shrill and desperate. Kevin, I need you to come here. Things are bad. I don't know what to do. Kevin turned to me, eyes wide with helplessness. She's in trouble, Elena? I crossed my arms, feeling my resolve harden. She's been in trouble of her own making. She dug this hole, Kevin. I know, but she's still my mother, he said, his voice shaking. I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar sting of frustration. If you go to her now, Kevin, you're undoing any progress we've made. He froze, torn between guilt and duty. But if I don't go, what kind of son am I? One who finally sets boundaries. One who respects his wife, I replied. Kevin's shoulders drooped. What do you want me to do? This is a test for you, Kevin. You need to choose us. If you don't, I'll know where we stand, I said, each word a heavy verdict. Kevin slowly nodded. All right, I won't go. The next day I consulted Mark again, finalizing some practical matters regarding the house. When I returned home, Kevin was waiting. I didn't respond to her, he said quietly, just like you asked. A small part of me felt relief. That's a start, Kevin. And I made an appointment with the counselor for both of us, he added. I nodded, feeling cautiously optimistic. Good. We need this. Later, as we sat silently in the living room, Kevin finally broke the quiet. I regret everything, Elena. Letting her come between us was the worst mistake of my life. I looked at him, sensing some genuine change. This is your chance to prove it. He reached out, taking my hand. I promise, Elena, I'll do better. As the days turned into weeks, we attended counseling sessions, slowly working through years of built-up resentment and betrayal. It wasn't easy, and I wasn't sure if Kevin and I would fully recover, but for the first time, there was a glimmer of hope. However, I couldn't shake the feeling that Lorraine wasn't done with her schemes, and I remained vigilant, ready for whatever her next move would be. This battle wasn't over, but I was no longer willing to be a passive participant in my own life. I was prepared to fight for my happiness, no matter the cost. The decision to move out temporarily was my last resort. Kevin and I had made progress in counseling, but I needed a fresh start to clear my mind and regain control. I found a small, furnished apartment a few blocks away, allowing me to maintain some distance while still keeping an eye on the home front. The day I left, Kevin looked distraught. Elena, I understand why you need to do this, but it feels so final. It's not forever, Kevin. It's just for now, I said, mustering as much reassurance as I could. I need space to heal. He nodded, but his eyes were filled with worry. I'll be here when you're ready. As I settled into my new place, I threw myself into work, excelling at the marketing firm and networking with new clients. One evening, I received a call from Nathan Parker, an old friend who had just launched a startup. Elena, I've been following your career for a while now. I'd love for you to join my team, he said enthusiastically. Excitement bubbled up. That sounds amazing, Nathan. Let's meet and discuss it further. Meanwhile, Lorraine's life was unraveling. Rumors reached me through mutual acquaintances. She and Kevin had been forced to move into a rundown apartment, their finances in tatters without my contributions. It seemed karma was catching up to her. Several weeks passed before Kevin called. Elena, can we meet? I need to talk to you. We met at a small cafe. Kevin looked worn out but sincere. I've missed you. The house feels empty without you. I've missed you too, I admitted, though cautiously. But have things changed? He sighed deeply. Lorraine's in over her head. She's been manipulating me for so long, and I finally see it. I've made arrangements for her to move in with a relative out of state. I raised an eyebrow. Really? Yes, he confirmed. I want to make things right, Elena. I want us to be happy again. A part of me felt relief, but I also knew I had to protect my heart. Kevin, it'll take time for me to believe things have truly changed. He nodded, understandingly. I'm willing to wait. As I walked back to my apartment, I mulled over our conversation. Was it possible Kevin had really changed? Only time would tell. The next day, I met with Nathan. The startup's energy was infectious, and I accepted his offer to join the team as their head of marketing. It was a fresh, exciting challenge and a chance to build something new. Months flew by. Work was fulfilling, and Kevin and I maintained cautious communication. Finally, one afternoon, I received the news I'd been expecting. Lorraine had moved out of state. Kevin called me later, his voice hopeful. The house is ours again, Elena? Can we start over? I hesitated a moment before answering. Yes, Kevin. We can give it another try. Moving back into the house felt surreal. It was as if a dark cloud had lifted, and the space was filled with possibilities once more. Kevin worked hard to rebuild trust, and the counseling sessions became a solid foundation for our new beginning. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sun dip below the horizon, Kevin turned to me. Thank you for giving us another chance, Elena. I won't let you down. Looking at him, I saw a genuine change and commitment in his eyes. I believe you, Kevin. Let's make the most of this. Life gradually became stable and fulfilling again. My career at Nathan's startup soared, and Kevin and I rediscovered our love and partnership. Lorraine's absence was a blessing that allowed us to focus on us without the constant undercurrent of manipulation. Occasionally, I'd hear whispers about Lorraine struggling in her new living situation. She had burned many bridges and found herself isolated and vulnerable. It may have been karma's way of balancing the scales. As time went on, Kevin and I thrived, stronger and more resilient than ever. The journey had been long and painful, but the light at the end was worth the battle. Now our lives felt rooted in mutual respect and genuine love, standing tall amidst the trials we'd conquered together.